I'm so glad to have on the podcast today, returning Marianne Williamson, presidential candidate, and most recently, DNC Chair candidate. Welcome back. Well, you know what, Marianne? I know you so much in this political context that I often omit your long and substantial career prior to this as a best-selling author, some teens times over? How many, a dozen plus books have you written, Marianne?
16.
16. And someone
I've been around a while.
I kid you not, people who have met you, gone to your kind of political presentations, engaged with you will know this already, but I have had so many times the experience of being out in the world with you and the magnetic draw that you have from so many people who know you from various parts of your life, who come up to you and want to talk to you and engage with you and have so much trust and respect for you because of the career that you've had in politics and also the career that you've had before. So I don't want to abbreviate your introduction by not recognizing that. So welcome back to the podcast, Marianne.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thank you. Well, it's always good to see you. Thank you for having me.
And for the first time on the podcast, we have Joseph Geevarghese, who is the executive director of Our Revolution, the largest grassroots independent organization in this country. Welcome, Joseph.
Thank you for having me. Excited to have an in-depth conversation about this moment.
Yeah, so as many people listening to this are probably aware, although many might not be, we just had the election for DNC chair just a few days ago as we're recording this. Marianne, as I mentioned at the top of the show, you were a candidate, and Joseph, Our Revolution demonstrated at the event, advocating for, I presume, a more progressive outcome to the election. I want to start with you, Joseph. What do you make of Ken Martin being chosen?
So when we're looking at the candidates, the first thing I would note is it was a race between Ken Martin and Ben Wickler. Ben was backed by billionaires, including Reid Hoffman. He was backed by Soros. He was backed by the Democracy Alliance, which is a dark money Democratic organization. And the reason I want to bring, and then Wickler was also endorsed by Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, right? The Democratic financial establishment and political establishment were lined up against Ken Martin and for Ben Wickler. So what I would say is sometimes you can tell who your friends are by understanding who the opponent's enemies are. And in this case, I think Ken we did not endorse in the race, and I'll tell you why. We asked all candidates, whether for chair or vice chair, to agree to the principle that there should be no corporate influence and no billionaire influence in the Democratic Party, right? The absolute only way that we can be an effective opposition party in this moment against Trump and his oligarchs is to have a position where we're not compromised. We're not forced to pull punches because the billionaires have a different agenda. And so that being said, Ken has in the past taken some contributions from billionaires. But that being said, the fact that the establishment is aligned against him says something. The fact that Keith Ellison endorsed him, Ilhan Omar endorsed him, he's built an effective operation in Minnesota. So, Ken is someone who we support now as the new leader, but we have to hold him and the other newly elected leaders accountable. So our work is not done, right? It only begins.
I appreciate that setup, Joseph. Just for background, Ben Wickler is the Wisconsin Democratic Party chair.
That's right.
Ben Wickler, same from Minnesota. You referenced the fact that you want to kind of Bernie style, I welcome their hatred, sort of know me by my enemies, FDR. We know that kind of rhetoric. And I think that that is a legitimate perspective to have. I am concerned about this kind of viral clip that was going around of Ken Martin talking about how, well, I don't think all the billionaires are bad, seemingly trying to put some distance between himself and some of the protests that were very, I think, appropriately focused on the negative influence of money within the Democratic Party and how it influenced some of the strategic choices in particular that the Kamala Harris and previously Joe Biden campaigns had been making that contributed to them losing the election in the view of many people on the left.
There are a lot of good billionaires out there that have been with Democrats who share our values, and we will take their money, but we're not taking money from those bad billionaires.
Here, thank you, Joe Martin.
And so before I come back to you, Marianne, I wanted you to give you a chance to sort of weigh in on this question of, well, what will the accountability mechanism be for someone like Ken Martin, who has taken billionaire dollars in the past, who has articulated a resistance to the idea that all billionaires are bad, who doesn't seem to believe in the sort of lefty truism that, every billionaire is a policy error. What do you respond to people who say, well, you can say the words accountability, but we've seen a real lack of accountability from the Democratic Party up until this point, from the DNC up until this point?
So, the accountability is us, right? It is groups like Our Revolution. Our members are the door knockers. They are the precinct captains. They are local party chairs. They're phone bankers. And if Ken Martin and the new leadership ignore their voices, I think we're on a path to lose. We surveyed our membership. Over 20,000 people responded, and only 14% of our members, who are the backbone of the Democratic Party, feel confident that Democrats are ready to defeat Trump and the oligarchs. That's a problem. Right? There is a no confidence vote among our membership for the Democratic Party and the political establishment. So it will be up to us, right, to make sure that we are in the decision-making roles. We're at the table. We did our own candidate forum with all of the candidates. Marianne was on. We sent letters and made calls. And these are state activists, county activists to their DNC members, right? And that is that is part of the accountability mechanism, I would argue.
I mean, I appreciate that, Joseph, but let me kind of put the same question to you, Marianne. Joseph's mentioning that Keith Ellison endorsed Ken Martin. You yourself endorsed Ken Martin, dropping out just before the vote. And I want you to speak to why that is. But principally, I want to get to this idea that we can still trust the endorsements of people like Keith Ellison, who myself and many people on the left really heralded as someone who was willing to be sort of oppositional to the Democratic Party and speak out, but who ultimately was part of the chorus of folks manufacturing consent for a clearly flailing Joe Biden. And then later, for Kamala Harris's campaign, despite the fact that he had these very personal commitments to Muslim communities here in the United States, who were obviously outraged over the way that the Biden and then Harris campaign and the Biden candidacy and then later the Harris candidacy litigated the war on Gaza and were insistent that they would not back a ceasefire.
Well, I certainly am not someone who was defending Joe Biden. I ran against him. And I was certainly out there decrying how all of that went down. Joseph described the situation perfectly. The vote for Ken was more a vote against Ben. I mean, everybody understood that Ben was a total extension of the status quo, the billionaire-backed status quo. In one of the forums, the last public forum, I myself brought up that there are no good billionaires, and I was speaking to both Ben and Ken. I pointed out that Reid Hoffman has been trying to get rid of Lena Khan from the beginning. I had known Reid Hoffman from the fact that in the New Hampshire primary, he spent $2 million on a write-in campaign for Biden. So he was very much a part of the get rid of anyone not Biden because I say so, because I'm a billionaire. So that is problematic that Ken has not been as, exactly what we would like to hear about billionaire donations. But he has been called out already. He was called out publicly by me during the campaign. Faz and I were both the voices of genuine progressivism. I don't know how, I haven't talked to Faz since. You know, he got in so late. I got in late. He got in so late. But we were heard. We were heard.
That's right.
As far as Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar, yeah, it's the Minnesota club. What Joseph said was also true when he said, "Who's going to hold them accountable?" Our revolution will hold them accountable. I certainly will hold them accountable. I was on Piers Morgan this morning. I'll be on Tucker Carlson later in the week. We're all out there. And I think all of us have had it with any kind of apologia for the democratic status quo. And that's the only way you can. We will use our public voices to hold them accountable by saying that this is corrupt as it used to be, if in fact it is. I don't look at Ken Martin. I got one text. Do you feel confident it will be fair now? And my response was, I feel confident that there is the possibility of it being fair now. And so at this point, I'd rather certainly lift him up than denigrate him before the man even has a chance to get his sea legs. But within about 6 weeks, we're going to see what we need to see. And I'm sure Joseph feels as I do. None of us are going to be quiet about what we feel.
When you say you're confident it will be fair now, what's the it in your view?
No, that's not what I said. That's not what I said.
Or sorry, that you're hopeful. Sorry, I didn't mean to misspeak. I'm just trying to figure out.
I feel confident. Yeah, I feel
that there's a possibility that it could be fair now.
Yeah, first of all, having run my experience as a candidate in the primaries, my experience of Ben Wickler as the chair of Wisconsin versus my experience of Ken Martin as chair of the party in Minnesota were diametrically opposed. Okay. Wickler was, kick him off ballots. We've already endorsed Biden, which is not your job, and so forth. Ken Martin was ethical and he was honorable. And I feel that the ethical corruption in the party is the basic problem. Obviously, Ken Martin is hearing a lot of voices in his ear right now. And you and I have actually had a previous conversation. Will he be able to see through the professional gaslighters who will be on him from the very beginning? What I feel is there is a possibility he will be able to withstand it. I think he is essentially in his heart, he wants to see fairness. We'll see. I think we need to hold him accountable, not by his words, but by his actions. And I think, what do you think, Joseph? 6 weeks or so?
I think that's
sort of what I'm thinking in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, but they should also invite you in to consult you, right? They should invite our grassroots members as they chart the direction, right? So we have to be there, and we have to organize to get a seat at the table, but that is important. I also want to add, one of our Revolution board members, Jane Klebb, she was a founding board member and head of the Nebraska State Party. She is now going to be the president of the Association of State Democratic Party Chairs. That is a significant role to have a progressive who supported Bernie Sanders in that seat, a progressive who was a pipeline, environmental pipeline fighter, climate champion. I think that's pretty significant, right? And I do believe that Jane will have Ken's ear because they were both the leaders of the ASDC, the state party group. They were the two top leaders over the past several years. So I think that's also incredibly encouraging. The other thing I just wanted to add here is, as an organizer, I used to be a union organizer with the steelworkers. I spent a lot of time in the Midwest before it crumbled, before the blue wall crumbled. The one state that did not crumble, right, was Minnesota. And I think that's incredibly significant. Not only did Minnesota, they held the line through good organizing in the party, but they cleared the way to elect Keith Ellison Attorney General. How important was that in a moment where we had George Floyd's murder, right? Ilhan Omar was, and Keith won in a statewide race where he was only, known in the city, right, as a U.S. congressperson. And also tarred and feathered as a Muslim. But he won statewide because there was a legitimate party operation. Tim Walz, same thing. He was able to get elected and move a progressive agenda because of the organizing infrastructure Ken and his team built. So, as Marianne said, yeah, it's not just words. Let's look at deeds. And
But let's look at deeds.
Yeah.
Because this is part of the problem. This is kind of part of my confusion. My understanding is that a sunrise movement, you mentioned the environment, so I'm just going to pick up on that.
Yeah.
A sunrise movement protester was dragged out by security after protesting fossil fuel money in the Democratic Party and chanting, we have a climate emergency.
What will you do to fight for ordinary working people instead of the billionaires that are trying to buy out our primary elections? My generation's futures are being destroyed by the climate crisis, please.
Tonight, young people with the Sunrise Movement forced Democratic Party leadership to reckon with what it actually means to fight for young people and working people across the country.
Raise your hand if you'll get billionaires out of our primary. Raise your hand. Who's raising their hand? None of you are raising your hand. Do you all work for billionaires or working people? Do you work for billionaires or young people like me?
They kept naming this great mystery of why young people are leaving the Democratic Party and saying that we needed to solve it with more research and more think tanks. The reality is the answer is right there. Young people are leaving because we're disillusioned by a party that doesn't actually fight for us.
Sorry to interrupt, but we need to know, what are you going to do to stop billionaires like Elon Musk from interfering in our democratic processes?
Members of Our Revolution also protested the influence of billionaire money and were talked down to. That's how I will characterize it. We'll put the clip in of Jamie Harrison, outgoing DNC chair, saying that this is about decorum and you got to treat a stranger's house better than you would treat your own house.
Are not, who weren't here yesterday. This is a room of respect. This is a room of decorum. We have DNC members here, but we also have invited guests. And in the South, when you come and you are invited to somebody's house, you treat their house better than you treat your own. And so today, we are going to go through the process of electing our next leadership in this party.
We have fascism at the gates, as Democrats have been beating the drum all of these years, and it feels like in this moment the priority is decorum of the people who should be at the center of the party, protesting the failures of the party. And also in another not very flattering viral clip, you saw DNC members dancing to the wobble at the same time again that they've been claiming that we are under a real exigent threat, which I think is a correct claim.
Right.
So why do you have so much confidence that these people in positions of authority within the DNC will have the necessary influence to change outcomes when we just saw this colossal abdication of responsibility and evidence that there isn't exactly humility with respect to the people who call this right, like the Sunrise organizers, like people from Our Revolution, like the broad left, like you, Marianne, in this moment, after they've already failed?
Well, first of all, no one knows better than I do, except maybe Bernie Sanders, the corruption of the DNC. And what I saw over the last few days was pretty clear. Corruption at the top, cluelessness in the middle, childishness at the bottom. That was the sense of my being there. But when you talked to individuals, I actually felt what was for me, wow, there is a critical mass of people here who get it. They don't necessarily know what to do about it. They know the answer is not to vote for Ben Wickler. And I believe that with what's going on in the country today, we can't leave any stone unturned. If somebody wants to say to hell with the Democratic Party, I'm going to go third party, I don't have any judgment on that. But I also feel for me and for many others, perhaps for you, Joseph, given what you've said, we don't have time for the Democratic Party to fail. So as far as the Sunrise movement is concerned, when I was running in my primary, Sunrise quickly, all of those groups, they quickly endorsed Joe Biden, and they wouldn't even take a Zoom meeting with me. I was saying everything that they say they believe in, but they were under the codependent thrall. We're going with Joe Biden because the DNC says so. So the fact that when they really could have made a statement, they were not willing to risk their being in with the in crowd, but now they'll make these performative moves talking about things when in fact the people on the stage already agree with them and are already talking about those things is not that impressive to me. Easy protest is now. The difficult protest that would have carried some courage and some chutzpah and some meaning and substance was early on when there were people trying to primary, at least in my case, someone trying to primary him on exactly the issues that they say they believe.
I agree with that, Marianne, but it's hard for me to square that. Like, I completely agree. I was frustrated very much I remember back in 2020 even, when they had endorsed Bernie, and then when Bernie dropped out of the race, they completely ignored the fact that they had given Joe Biden an F on his climate report card, and then just threw in their lot with him as though they had to endorse. Joseph, you're saying that our revolution did not endorse. That's clearly an option. But that brings me back to you, Marianne. Is there any similarity? If someone says, okay, well, Sunrise shouldn't have endorsed Biden. Sunrise should have some baseline standards before they offer their endorsement to somebody, even if it might tip the scale. And obviously, Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump. How is that different from your thinking as you decided not to, let's say, endorse Faz or whoever the next most progressive candidate that might have had a better chance? I don't know if he would have had a better chance of succeeding than you, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like, who would throwing your hat to the most successful, genuine progressive who fully shares your views on these issues like money and politics, instead of doing a sort of lesser to evilism and voting for the better of the two candidates most likely to win?
For me personally, this is not a moment for performative gestures. And I said to the kids who were sitting there in Sunrise, when they carried that person out, I said, you guys need to stop if you're so upset about these things, stop enabling Democratic candidates who you don't agree with. I actually said that at the forum. As far as what happened in this particular circumstance, none of the three of us know what Ken Martin is going to do. And once again, as Joseph has pointed out, the race, these were the two guys who had been there from the beginning. The race had clearly coalesced around them. Let's remember, Ben Wickler had a $2 million campaign. I don't know how much Martin's was, but it was a big campaign. At this point, my interest is not in making performative gestures. My interest is in throwing whatever weight I might have in the direction at that point of it not being Ben Wickler, because I do believe with Ken Martin, I'm open. I'm open here. I think there is a chance. When Joseph was saying, will he have Joseph at the table? Will he have me at the table? Will he have other people in his sort of team? I think there's a very good chance he will. And I'm not naive. He might not. But to me, he has earned my personal respect, and he has earned my belief that there's a real possibility that we'll have a shot of what I see as a kind of redemption and a genuine transformation of the DNC.
And
Maybe we should shift to. Go ahead, Joseph.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's really important in this moment also, that we ground ourselves and we don't, right? I mean, there's an existential moment for our country right now. We have a president, right? I mean, if the scene at the inauguration, Donald Trump surrounded by oil and gas and tech oligarchs. I mean, that hit me in the gut. And then I reflected on, right, that was January 20th. I reflected on President Biden's farewell address, where he warned Americans on his way out, right, on January 15th. There is an oligarchy rising, right, dangerous concentration of power and wealth, and it threatens the foundations of our country. He specifically talked about climate, he talked about tech and AI. Those were the people behind Donald Trump. And what is the dirty deal that's happened? Just to be clear, right? It is big tech wants crypto and they want AI unleashed. Biden wouldn't go along. And so Silicon Valley went hard right over AI and crypto being unleashed. And we saw the president immediately act on that. The second thing, what does AI and crypto need? Energy. Right? They need fossil fuels unleashed. And President Trump is doing that, in addition to the purge and everything else. So in this moment, I don't think we can afford to have a circular firing squad. We need to act in a way, right, that calls out what is happening. There's a purge happening of federal employees. Our data is being stolen. J6 protesters have been not protesters, I'm sorry, criminals have been set free. We're going to start to see the formation of paramilitary violence in advancement of Trump's agenda. I think this is a really wake-up moment. And so our goal is, we want to get to a better world, but in organizing, you have to start in the world as it is. And the world as it is getting really it's everything I learned in high school or law school has been thrown out the window. It's wild. How are we allowing this to happen? And so that being said, we have to organize with who we have in this moment and make sure that we help Americans open their eyes to the threat and then overcome fear so we can protest. I think that's the moment we're in. We need Sunrise, we need Climate Defiance, we need all of the groups, as well as Democratic electeds to start speaking out about what is happening. We're moving very quickly the direction of Russia, India, China, Hungary.
Joseph, Joe Biden took more billionaire donations than anybody else in the 2020 race.
He should have warned us. He should have, Wait,
what do you mean he should have warned us? He was the beneficiary of the corrupt system that he is at the top of.
But no,
he's at the top of that system.
No, I want to be clear,
because he's the beneficiary of it.
I'm not defending Joe Biden. I've engaged with Biden for over a decade, from when he was vice president, on unions. He's not a union guy. Union density has gone down under Democrats. It's unacceptable. He did not put a single worker in the union. I'm as pissed as you are. But that being said, what I'm also pissed is he warned the American people 5 days.
What warning? Wait a minute, Joseph. Joe Biden was president of the United States of America for 4 years.
And he regulated crypto and AI.
Wait a minute.
Yeah. Mark Andreessen
Joe Biden was the president of the United States of America. Yeah. And at no point did he try to reanimate his president, when he was vice president, Barack Obama's campaign promises about getting money out of politics, something that was supposed to be a bipartisan, both he and John McCain, a meeting of the minds on this particular issue. Barack Obama abandoned that priority when it became clear that he was the top fundraiser and that he was going to be the beneficiary of all of this new online donations that were coming through in his first campaign. And Joe Biden and the Democratic Party didn't give a flying fig about reforming the system that they very much benefited from enormously. So the idea that in the ninth inning, Joe Biden was going to teeter up to the stage and say, oh, actually, billionaires are bad, watch out, when it was because of his own negligence that people like Donald Trump and the tech bros that he has put at the top of our government are in the position of power that they do have, frankly, is insulting.
Yes, and I would say this, but part of the reason Silicon Valley went hard right is because they were angry at Lina Khan. They were angry at the White House's regulation of crypto and AI. Mark Andreessen, talks about his meeting with high-level Biden appointees, including the National Security Advisor. And Mark Andreessen said, hey, AI and crypto is our next big thing. That's our next big moneymaker. And the National Security Advisor says, no, it's not. AI is going to be close hold. We're going to treat it just like Los Alamos physics, right? It is that dangerous. And we're going to share with a couple of companies. Same thing, crypto is destabilizing because we have a political economy. Crypto unshackles currency from governance. It's really problematic. And so once Andreessen and his partner Horowitz, and they gave $47 million to Biden in 2020. Once they walked out of that West Wing meeting, they looked at each other and it's like, we've got to go Trump. And they organized Silicon Valley in an unprecedented way in reaction to what Biden did. Is it perfect? No. Should it have been better? Yes.
Help me understand why you're saying that. Is your argument that
no, I'm saying
we should deregulate crypto, or that Biden should have gotten rid of Lena Khan, or
no, not at all. I'm saying we need to we can't just be critical. We need to recognize Joe Biden's administration did do some stuff that was good, and the billionaire class went the other way as a result to Donald Trump, right? And that's says something. Their business interests were not being advanced under Joe Biden.
But the billionaire class is the tiniest minority group in the United States of America. And
but they control the levers of power.
But wait a minute. The question is, why did 15 million people decide not to vote for Joe Biden, who had previously voted, or for Kamala Harris, who had previously voted for Joe Biden
because
4 years before?
Because she was compromised too by money.
And the polls suggest that 29% of the people who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 and didn't vote for Joe Biden in 2024 listed Gaza as their top reason, not
we
crypto
were involved in the uncommitted
policy.
I mean, I'm morally, it's abhorrent what has happened. So I want
to come back to...
But I'm also saying, what's happening in America right now should be our focus. There is an unprecedented marriage of corporate power and state power in a way that will undermine our democracy. And that's the fight we got to fight. And it starts with making the Democratic Party a real opposition party. And we did actually win. We defeated Jeffries and Schumer and Pelosi's pick. We defeated Soros's pick. We defeated Reid Hoffman's pick. I think that's a pretty good thing. I think that's a pretty good thing, because I was there when we tried to move Keith Ellison. It was hard, right? But we did strike a blow to the political and economic powers in this election. And I think that's really important, because that then does the setup for challenging Trump and the oligarchs.
Marianne, I want to come back to you. The Wall Street Journal just published an article on February 2nd called "Democrats Have a New Leader, but haven't come to grips with failure." This is how they enumerate these failures. They write, all the candidates could agree that the situation facing the party is dire. The Democratic brand is in the toilet, with a recent Wall Street Journal poll showing 60% of Americans view the party unfavorably, while only 36% see it favorably. Democrats lost ground with nearly every demographic group last November, including minorities, women, low-income voters, and those without college degrees. 20 big cities, Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, that's what's left of the Democratic Party, lamented former congressional candidate Adam Frisch. And I'm not exactly sure those 20 big cities are getting the best version of the Democratic Party. I want you to tell me what your perspective of was inside of these conference rooms at the DNC, how much introspection and reflection was done about why exactly the Democratic Party failed in 2024. Because it does seem to me outwardly, through the media, the expression from Democratic Party leaders seems to be focused on there being some media mismanagement, not exploiting podcasts and untraditional media in the way that Donald Trump and Republicans were able to do, and less so on the substance of the Democratic Party's policies, including their policies on Gaza, their sort of hand-waving around inflation and economic issues, their unwillingness to see that the anti-war cohort of the American public saw the right as the more, you can call it isolationist, you can call it pro-peace, but definitely more America first than the Democratic Party. Do you see that there was a reckoning with any of that? And also the strategic failures of the Democratic Party with respect to choosing to back Biden long past the point at which we now know internal polls showed that he was guaranteed to lose to Donald Trump by 400 electoral votes?
Well, it's very rare for me to say I agree totally with anything that the Wall Street Journal had to say, but I certainly do agree with what with what you just read, and I can honestly tell you that I said all those things at the convention over the last 3 days, so whatever it was. I don't care. You can look all across the board at anybody's race or ethnicity. They are being economically screwed in America today, and that is the truth that
everybody needs to hear in terms of the electorate who's not getting what they need from us. And I was a TikTok sensation when my presidential campaign began, and I know why. Because I was telling the truth, that there is a matrix of corporate powers. It has to do with insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, big food companies, big ag, big chemical companies, gun manufacturers, big oil and defense contractors, and they are holding our nation hostage. Their short-term profits have replaced humanitarian and democratic ideals. Their undue influence on our government has turned Washington into a system of legalized bribery. These are what Franklin Roosevelt called the economic royalists. And when people see us standing against them, what they see now is the Democratic Party trying to have it both ways. We want to help people, but we won't go so far where if we cross the line, that's going to offend our donor base. All the Democratic Party has to do is do the right thing. Stand for your values. Stand for the working people of the United States. Unequivocal advocacy. Show them, as Fez was saying, people are not dumb. People are smart. And when they see that, they will vote for us. They'll come home if we do the right thing.
I did feel that there was this kind of, and I said a few times, there's this pep rally feel here that is totally inappropriate to the moment. We should be in deep and sober grief and reckoning. So no, did I feel I was with, just like I said to you earlier, a lot of childishness and cluelessness? I definitely saw that. I did. But it was in talking to individuals that I realized there are some people here who I do feel are getting it. Listen, the reason I ran is on the platform of everything that you just said. Obviously, the fact that I was not able to break through, that there was as much resistance to what I was saying being the exact message you just said, means that there was not the requisite consciousness to fully embrace that. There's too much fear. To be honest, it's not a deeply conscious I don't want to talk about individuals here, but there was not the sense of a deep, mature consciousness that meets what I think of as the moment we're in. But people aren't stupid either. So it's a process. Now the question will be how far Ken is willing to go in opening up to a larger conversation that more people such as myself can feel at home within. Now, Joseph, you sound pretty committed as the executive director of our revolution to stay in there for that fight with the Democrats. For myself, my loyalty is not to a party. My loyalty is to my country. My loyalty is to American democracy, which is now under full-scale authoritarian assault. So I'll go anywhere and speak anywhere and do whatever I feel I can possibly do to contribute to a breakthrough. And that does include coming out of any level of denial, not only about how bad things are, but number two, how much the Democratic Party contributed to it being this bad.
Yes, that's right.
Well, let's talk about this denial, because Jamie Harrison, outgoing DNC chair, recently sat down for an interview in which he said that Kamala Harris should run again in 2028. And that Joe Biden should never have dropped out of the race in the first place. That he would have won.
I want to remind you. Okay, yeah. I want to remind you, because this is based also on a few other things you said about Biden. Biden is gone. He is no longer in power. Jamie Harrison is gone. He is no longer in power. We've got to bring the conversation into the present.
So right, let's bring it into the present, Marianne.
I am totally in agreement. We're in a dangerous moment. And we need everyone to stand up. And that's why our members have done the work to defeat the elites and help elect. We called every member of the DNC. We sent them open letters. We organized to take back the Democratic Party. It's a work in progress. But right now, the candidate that was favored by Schumer, Jeffries,
I understand that, Joseph, but let me ask this question, because I think this is clarifying.
We kicked the ass.
Yeah, I understand you said that.
And the billionaires. I
want to make sure that we get to the meat and potatoes, because I got to be honest with you, I don't care, and I know my audience doesn't care. So let me ask.
They don't care about our democracy or the fact that we
they don't care about giving the lesser of two evil Democratic Party chair candidates
your analysis
credit
isn't correct.
All right. Well, let's talk about
I
the
want to say
analysis.
something to that, if I may.
Wait a minute. Let's. I want to go ahead and ask this question though. The question that I want to get out that was setting up was: have either of you heard any commitments from Ken Martin that he acknowledges that it was a mistake to run Joe Biden to shut down a Democratic primary when an overwhelming majority of Democratic primary voters 2 years before the Democratic election did not want him to be the nominee, and by the summer before the election, internal polls were showing that he was guaranteed to lose? Has there been any acknowledgement of the colossal decision-making failure in the actual candidate choice over the course of the last 2 years that led to this existential moment that we're in now?
Yes, I think so. I think I can say yes, in that he has acknowledged to me the mistreatment of me. And the mistreatment of me is the essential core issue, the de-amplification and suppression of any campaigns other than Joe Biden. So
all due respect,
I
Marianne,
felt that I was.
that is a piece of it for sure. But the question of whether or not the Democratic Party, one, is allowed to have a primary, and two, whether or not the DNC should have covered up Biden's obvious frailty for years and years and years are somewhat, it's a bigger issue and a separate issue than the particular issues with respect to you're being allowed to have ballot access in the state of Wisconsin, for instance, which is something that
but the point
Ken
is,
had more of a direct relationship with. What is the point? The point, Marianne, is the confidence level. I hear both of you saying that you have not total confidence. Again, I don't mean to mischaracterize you at all.
We're organized.
But not total confidence that things are going to get better, but a kind of measured hopefulness that someone better than the last guy is in the driver's seat and therefore things will get better. And when I say I don't care, I'm not particularly moved by that, this is why. Because this is identical to the rhetoric that we were fed at the beginning of the Biden administration. Just wait and see. We don't know what kind of leader he's going to be. When 40 years of political history, a guy who was the youngest senator ever elected at the time he was elected, and at 56, I don't know how long he's been in office, but an incredible amount of time in Congress on the record showed us exactly the kind of guy he was going to be. And it was absolutely no surprise when he rigged the $15 minimum wage out of the must-pass COVID bill. It was no surprise when he bifurcated the infrastructure bill into the must-pass part and the part.
Yeah, we have to turn the chapter. There's a brand new political moment in our country. And it is a threat. And so we got to fight back. And I'm saying this is what our members did. We defeated the establishment pick to run the party. I think that's pretty huge.
Yeah, I might agree with you, Joseph, if Marianne won, or maybe if Faz won, but I have a really hard time saying that when basically it's like saying Biden lost, but Pete Buttigieg won. I mean, okay, I'm not going to celebrate the next most neo-lib guy on the ticket.
Well, I disagree with that analysis.
Go ahead,
I don't think it's centered.
I ran in 2020 I ran in 2020 as well. I remember that night. I assume it was Obama who made the phone call. I don't have any inside information, but I can't imagine anyone else who would have had the power. All of a sudden that night, Buttigieg drops out. Klobuchar drops out. Beto O'Rourke says, I endorse him in Texas. It wasn't just the corruption at the top. It was the fact that normie Democrats went along with this. And that is true not only of normie Democrats, but in 2024 as well. Even people on the left. There was a candidate. I'm not trying to personalize this, but damn it, there was a candidate. And so anybody who went, it wasn't like no one was there saying the things that theoretically we all believe should have been said. And it was the misogyny and it was everything else falling for the narratives created by the DNC, for God's sake. So we have to look at more than just what the people on the top did. It was what a lot of people did to enable it to go through. And now, as Joseph said, that was then and this is now. And, it's not even just confidence. When you said before about to have the confidence, I can't speak for Joseph, but for myself, it's more than confidence. In fact, it isn't confidence, but it is giving people the benefit of the doubt for the next 6 weeks until they're proven otherwise. That doesn't mean have confidence. It means I'm saying, okay, Ken, I hope you'll do it. I wish you the best. I support you. I want to lift you up. I think in politics on the left particularly, we're so quick to tear people down when really, if we want the kind of leftist leadership that we need to do more lifting up of people who are trying to make it happen. And Ken Martin might. He might.
I have yet to be persuaded that Ken Martin might. There is often this accusation. Wait, one second. Let me just get this out. Joseph, if I may.
I think we should organize to do that. That's what we have to do to win.
There is an accusation that gets lobbed at the left of having circular firing squads and unfair litmus tests. In fact, this Wall Street Journal article goes on to characterize it thusly. Yet as the would-be leaders bickered over party mechanics, the very pathologies that many critics argue have alienated Democrats from the American heartland were on display. A party captive to leftist activists, obsessed with divisive litmus tests, out of touch with regular people's concerns, and in the thrall of to a patronizing identity politics that alienates many of the very minorities it means to attract. I understand this criticism. In some instances, it is fair. But the complete abdication of any and all litmus tests, I would argue, is in fact what has enabled the Democratic Party to be where it is, and to put some people like yourselves, who are ostensibly the leftist folks, the most left organization, the most left candidate within this Democratic Party context, affirming and legitimizing someone who, by your own description and admission, has taken billionaire donors' dollars in the past, has manufactured consent for the candidate who was uniquely vulnerable for multiple reasons and lost this election, and in a space in which there has been, as I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, little to no accountability, and instead blame being put on the very groups like Sunrise and Our Revolution and these pro-Palestine groups, et cetera, who were ringing the alarm bell, accurately predicting the kinds of changes the Democratic Party needed to make if, in fact, they wanted to win. So how can a party be pushed? Who is supposed to be, why would they be moved? And when FDR says, make me do it, in that perhaps apocryphal story, who is it that's supposed to be making them do it if the people who are closest to them in the inside, like yourselves, seem to be willing, at least for a 6-week period, to give them the benefit of the doubt? What have they done to earn the benefit of the doubt?
Well, it's not for me about earning the benefit of the doubt. My blood, sweat, and tears has gone into opposing these people and their BS and their corruption and their hypocrisy. I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, well, why wasn't I supporting someone when that person existed? And a lot of those left-wing organizations that you're talking about were so excited because they get a phone call from the White House, or maybe a Christmas card, a Christmas from a Democratic administration. And maybe if they were really good, they get to go to one of those White House Christmas receptions. I know how it works. So it's not like the left has a lot to be proud of, okay? Right now, as Joseph keeps going back to, and I agree with him, we are in the midst of a fascist takeover. This stuff is not theoretical right now. And also, I'm not, so fine, maybe, listen, if something happens where I feel like, this is just not happening, I'll be the first to say, I'm out. But just for me personally, and I see Joseph nodding his head, I'm not going to leave any possibility open that might provide the opportunity to stave off the fascist takeover of the United States of America.
How are they going to stave off? What's the plan, as you heard it sort of articulated at the DNC convention, to stave off the fascism?
There has to be a serious intent, tell me if you agree with this, on winning the House back in 2026.
Oh, so the fascism.
If we could win the House in we're
going to have the fascism until 2026 for 2 years.
No, obviously. Listen, neither Joseph nor I are saying that there doesn't need to be an outside-inside approach. Neither one of us are like these normie Democrats. At least I can't speak for you, but I'm not, and I don't get that you are. If you're executive director of our revolution, everything from general strike to everything anybody else feels moved to do. It's just all of us, I think, need to follow our own guidance for where do you feel you could be helpful? I've always felt that way about you, Bree. You have a sense, and I had a conversation earlier with Jen Huger just earlier today because we were on Piers Morgan together. I called him afterwards and he was telling me how we should all be playing this, the strategy we should all have. I said, excuse me, we should all do what we feel moved to do. You know, I'm a writer. I don't tell other writers what books they should write. They don't write me. You know, I think we should all do the piece that we are given to do. And Joseph and I right now feel that there's something here having to do with the Democratic Party. And I don't think anybody needs to justify to anybody else the part that we feel moved to play at a particular
Yeah, that's
time.
right. Well, and that's just one part of the opposition. We're not waiting to 2026, right?
That's right.
More that Donald Trump moves Elon Musk and all of their agendas, right, which is privatization and plunder the United States government, the punishment of opposition people like Marianne and myself, right? The longer they sit in power unchallenged, the more they will have, the firmer grip they will have on levers of power, and they will be harder to dislodge. And so I'm in discussions, right, with top climate leaders, other activist organizing leaders about mobilizations and about strategy. I would also say, and in fact, we're doing a national organizing call with Sunrise and other groups on Monday, this coming Monday, to talk about Trump and the oil and gas oligarchs. So, no, the resistance is starting now. And I would also say there are thousands of elections this year down ballot, and our revolution is playing on that, right? From county chairs to mayors to city councilors. That is the next generation of leaders. And we're endorsing and cultivating progressives, populists, right, to build the bench. That is part of the opposition as well. There's, multiple fronts in this fight, but we're going all in because the other option is incredibly dangerous for our way of life and our personal security.
Well, what's the other option? I'm curious as to whether, for instance, our revolution, if there is a let many flowers bloom approach, and if you're supportive of third-party candidates, independent candidates.
Yeah, if they can win, that's great. And if they're independents aligned with our ideology, that's great. I mean, Bernie Sanders is independent. I'm a political independent.
And help me understand what aligned with your ideology is, because as I remember from being Bernie's national press secretary, we talked about things like Medicare for all and the fact that 88% of Democratic voters support said policy. Is that the kind of organizing incentive and policy incentive that was discussed in the context of who the next DNC chair should be and how to mobilize voters in 2026 and in 2028?
Well, at the forums, I have to say, I and Faz, I think we're the only ones who kept going back to policies such as that. There was not a lot of policy discussion among the main two, among Ben and Ken. They kept it on workers' rights, the working people of the United States. To me, you can't have that conversation without getting into talking about what that means, such as Medicare for all. And that was not
a $15 minimum wage, perhaps?
Absolutely,
which is the core Democratic Party commitment that
I led the national strike for 15 strikes a decade ago. I was a key strategist for that. I mean, it is, and you know why we had to strike workers? Because Barack Obama in his first term, right, I used to go into meetings and say, here's executive orders to raise labor standards, raise wages, leverage federal contracts. We had to strike outside under a Democratic president to get what we wanted. And we're still not there, but we're much closer than we ever have been.
How do you quantify that, Joseph? Help me understand why it is that you feel like
we
we're
raised
closer.
the minimum wage on federal contractors. The president announced in his 2014 State of the Union, that was 6 months after our first set of strikes. We struck Pentagon workers, we struck Senate workers, cafeteria workers, fast food workers, all around the country. And he raised the minimum wage on federal contracts, and he tied it to the cost of living, and it's now $17+. That affects 20 million Americans. That's huge, right? But it took a fight and an inside-outside fight. And in fact, the way,
Yes.
I mean, Bernie was one of the few people to stand with us at those strikes. And that's arguably, honestly, how he built his profile. It was at our strikes fighting for a core issue. Most Democrats didn't come. It was Keith Ellison, it was Bernie, right? And they used that populist run, right, to really reshape the party. And that was part of our plan.
I agree that those things were important, but the real fight that needed to be taken on was that Joe Biden needed to fire the parliamentarian. That's what any Democrat would have done. When he tried to take the $17 an hour and put it in the COVID relief bill, and the parliamentarian stopped him. That's the weak spine of the Democratic Party. And I think, and that just got to stop. So saying, but we did this, it's still an incremental approach. I think part of what people actually admire about Donald Trump is his audacity. We need to have the same level of audacity. Enough is enough. People should make a living wage. Not a few people got a little bit more. Every American should be able to live a life of dignity and support a family on one salary, period. And we will not stop, and we will not take less. That needs to be the Democratic Party. Going back a little bit to what you were saying about the event itself. So, Joseph, you were there, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I assume you'll agree with this. Bree, it was far more, for my taste, too focused on the restructuring, which is necessary, the administrative improvements, which are, it is criminal that they are so necessary, that the way the organization has been run is so incredibly inept. But there was so much concentration on those administrative details, as important as they are, that there was very little talk about, which I certainly brought to the table, which was, why don't we just become who we say we are? Why don't we actually fight for the working people of the United States? Why don't we actually make the stands against oligarchy and economic royalism that we need to? That would take care of a lot of this. So no, that was a bit disturbing for me.
And why don't you think that was, Marianne? Why, so to us, the three of us sitting here, it's like so patently obvious. I mean, you're hearing these Democrats talk about, like, we need more podcasters. We need the Joe Rogan of the right. Like, we need, like, as though that's what's going to move the needle, and not that there's a relationship between the Democratic Party's popularity and what they have on offer. I see them wanting to throw various minority groups under the bus. I see this weird debate happening over, like, pronouns, as though the issue of pronouns, there's this weird bipartisan confidence that the issue of pronouns is more dispositive to the average American than, gosh, gee willikers, what if you were offered an additional point of focus, like someone who was genuinely going to deliver on an economic material promise, like a living wage, like guaranteed housing, like universal health care? I would argue, and I know you would argue, Marianne, and I'm not as familiar with you, Joseph, but I presume, given your role at Our Revolution, that you understand that there is an incredible appeal to the policy is the mess. The policy is the appeal. And Bernie Sanders bursting through the way he did in 2016, when he had no real sense that it was going to be anything more than a messaging campaign, and then recreating that phenomenon in 2020 and coming so close to winning, is evidence of the efficacy of that strategy. So we started talking about money and politics, and my frustration that while, yes, Ben Wickler seems to be the worst of the bunch with respect to the billionaire donations, that Ken Martin does not have clean hands in this regard. And I think that there's a direct relationship between the unwillingness to say, no, billionaire money is bad, and the Democratic Party's unwillingness to adopt the kind of policy platform that, yes, would rankle, that would infuriate the donor class, in turn, including very powerful lobbying groups, including in the healthcare industry. Joseph, you raised this issue of Joe Biden irritating the tech bros. I don't mean to be overly simplify it or characterize it in a kind of dismissive way, but you raised this issue of Biden's policies with respect to this cohort causing some backlash. Of course, that's going to be the case. When you do the right thing, it hurts a very small minority of privileged, rich people who want control, and you get backlash, but you also get support. And that's the lesson I took away from the Bernie movement. My frustration that you're hearing from me is that it feels so obvious that there's a fundamental change the Democratic Party would need to make in order to win that has to do with genuinely disassociating itself from its donor base.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing is that there is not a willingness to do so. And I guess my frustration is that it doesn't feel like your frustration is matching mine when I
No,
hear
that's not
that
true. I
failure
would
of
say
recognition.
It's not
both.
true.
Yeah, I don't
No.
think that's true at all. I mean, Marianne
Tell me
and
what's
I
true
were
for
both
you.
there fighting the fight. And yeah, so I mean, it's fine to have
Thank you. I agree
sit
with
on
Joseph.
the
Yeah.
sidelines and critique, but we were there
Yeah, and we were
trying to hold the
absolutely.
party
Thank you.
accountable to everything you're saying, right? Us, our members,
Help me
were
understand
there.
what that looks like.
But I'm just saying,
What did the accountability for Ken Martin, who again is going viral for going out of his way to say, I don't believe all the billionaires are bad. What's the accountability for him recognizing this?
Yeah, we have to disabuse them of that. And the truth is, right, the other side, we defeated the billionaires. The key billionaire backers of the Democratic Party, we locked them out of power.
I want to, and
Yep.
it was called being all day, every day, talking at forums, talking at caucuses, saying exactly what you're saying, Bree. I want to go back, if I may, a little to the conversation you were having about AI and crypto. And when you were talking about Mark Andreessen and the meetings at the White House, I think, Joseph, it was more nuanced than that. I get the feeling from when I read those articles, they went to those meetings and they were told what you said they were told in a very condescending, patronizing way. So you're these young staffers in an office in the West Wing are telling these mega gazillionaire tech people who control all that they control, no, as opposed to engaging them in a serious conversation. Like when you said, no, it's going to be treated like nuclear power. Well, in a way, it should be treated like a nuclear power.
Yes.
But the Democratic Party needs to make its argument for why. We should have talked about how this should be not just about you guys making money. It should be about the fate of humanity. There need to be reasonable guardrails. There need to be reasonable regulations. And let us try to enroll you in that view so that we can work together. And I think that that applies to crypto too. No one was making the argument, this is setting us up for the same thing that happened in 1929. This is setting us up for a depression. You cannot have unregulated commodities like this. There was this very patronizing, condescending no, that you don't talk to people like that and just say no. So it was more than just that we were opposing their ability to make money. It was this attitude that offends rich people as much as it offends poor people. How dare you? How the hell dare you? Who do you think you are towards the Democratic Party? That, listen, turns me off too.
Yeah, my hesitation to go too deep into this topic is because the previous episode was all about sort of the tech industry strategy here. So it's not that I'm disinterested in this. I just feel like we kind of flushed this out on the
just because it came up with Joseph and
no,
that was interesting.
I appreciate that. I did want to come back to something that you said earlier, Marianne, about the climate people and the Sunrise group. In particular, their willingness to sort of go along with the Democratic Party, despite the sharp criticisms during the primary in 2020. I share your frustration. I have a different perspective on their protests now. My narrative, and this could be wrong, but what I am observing is what was a new, more radical climate group that emerged in 2020. That was scared by Donald Trump, as so many people were, especially in the context of the pandemic. So when Bernie and the other progressive options were no longer around, felt insecure in their relative youth. I don't mean like chronological youth, but the organization's youth. And decided that they didn't want to seem so unserious that they didn't endorse anybody or that they held out when quote unquote democracy was on the ballot. I remember specifically them being offered a quite literal seat at the table. I remember watching this video of them sitting down with, I think, Simone Sanders as an emissary from the White House. And promises and representations being made to them about how Biden was going to listen to the climate kids for once. I then saw over the course of Biden's general election campaign, him persuade the American people to not oppose fracking. I believe there was something like a 20-point swing in the American public's perspective on whether fracking was bad, because Biden represented to the American public that in order to win Pennsylvania, you had to be pro-fracking, which is not true. There are more, for instance, many times more minimum wage voters in Pennsylvania, a north bluish state that still has the federal minimum wage, than there are employees in the fracking industry. But never mind, I saw him negatively influence the public in a conservative direction over that issue. Not to mention criminal justice issues and a whole other host of things that he, as a Democrat, convinced folks they needed to move right on in order to defeat Trump. I see in that moment the climate people realizing that was a mistake. And now coming back in a more adversarial attitude. Now, that might not be the narrative. Maybe they're just being more adversarial now because Trump's already won and there's nothing to lose. But I would like to believe that they learned a lesson from trusting that the Democrats were going to do the right thing and realizing that they will literally never, unless they have no other alternative. And sometimes even when they don't have any other alternative, they'll still do the bad thing because they don't give a shit about losing, as we saw, I would argue, in the last election.
I think what you're saying is not only...
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I think what you're saying is true. And I think it applies across the board. People are human. People are processing. People are realizing where they got it wrong and where we need to change. You know, Martin Luther King once said something about, don't mistake our material passivity. We are spiritually active. You know, when people say nothing's going on, nobody's complaining, nobody's resisting, I think people are processing. And I think what you just said about Sunrise applies to millions and millions of people. It's like, wow, I got that wrong. But we have to give people a chance. You know, when people fall down, and we have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We have to have some mercy. Just like we're saying, have some mercy towards Ben and so to Ken, you're saying about Sunrise, and I think they're both true. Let's give people a chance to. Everything's recalibrating is really what I'm trying to say. Right. Let the recalibration occur. Yeah. And let's have some grace towards one another while it's happening.
Ask you guys,
each other is not the enemy. The enemy is somebody else.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Wait, who's not the enemy?
We're organized.
I'm sorry, who did you say is not the enemy?
I said, those of us who see all this differently, we're not the enemy. The enemy is fascism. The enemy is authoritarianism.
Donald Trump and the oligarchs.
I guess my concern is that I think
government against us.
I do think the Democratic Party is the enemy.
No, well, I'm just going to say there is an existential threat to this country and the world and to our well-being. And
right, because the Democrats
imperative. Yes,
were asleep at the wheel.
But I'm just saying, no, we're organizing them. That's what we're doing. We have grassroots volunteers in the Democratic Party who are chairs and precinct captains, who are Bernie supporters. They're angry, but they're organizing because they've seen how rigged the party is, and they're starting to turn things around. I think this election is hopeful in that regard. But it's not the only opposition, right? We've got masses of federal employees being purged, the highest levels of the Department of Justice and the FBI. I mean, my God, right? This is a moment for deep political education and activation. And so we have to organize on every front. And I've been spending a lot of time doing one-on-ones with our members, leaders, in addition to political leaders and organizational leaders. And it takes a little bit to connect the dots of what's happening. But when the light bulb goes on, right, there is a fundamental commitment to fight. And we've got to fight on all fronts and organize on all fronts, including in the Democratic Party.
You're talking about down-ballot races, which are so important. Was there any discussion of and commitment to not doing things like what the Democratic Party did, which was to support anti-choice Henry Cuellar over progressive Jessica Cisneros?
I certainly did. I brought up that one.
But I know, I mean, this is my frustration, Marianne. I know that people like you, someone like you would.
You did.
But ultimately, Marianne, but this is what's so frustrating. Ultimately, you dropped out before the vote, so we don't know how the vote would have gone for you. And, I don't know.
It was going to be Ben or Ken.
But that's the problem. It was going to
be Ben or Ken. And I thought maybe I could help 20 people go over to Ken, because at that point it was believed it was going to be 50-50, when in fact he won by over 100 votes. He didn't.
So what you're saying, though, is that as far as you know, Ken So you might, it turns out your votes weren't needed, but it might have been that your endorsement of Ken was dispositive. Prior to giving that endorsement, Marianne, did you get any of these kinds of commitments that the Democratic Party wasn't going to fight against progressive incumbents, pro-choice progressive incumbents against anti-choice moderates in an election that happened months after Roe was overturned? You know, were any of those kind of commitments secured? Yeah.
That was not the kind of conversations that were happening there, number one. And number two, the DNC doesn't have control over that. I definitely brought up the Cuellar, the Pelosi, the Jessica Cisneros issue on one of the forums. But in terms of it being a major conversation, that's simply not what was happening there. What was happening there was important. It just wasn't enough. But what happened to the DNC is that it's been a small group of people working with a handful of consultancy firms, Waterfront, Precision. It's extremely corrupt stuff. They only addressed the presidential campaigns. They didn't pay any attention with all of that money to the down ballot issues. And even more importantly, they gave only a pittance of money to the states. For instance, in that last forum in DC, Simone Sanders or Jen Psaki or Jonathan Capehart, I can't remember which one, said, we all know how important it is to raise money for the DNC so they can give it to the states. Well, that's just not even the way it happens because they give little pittance to the states and they make the states raise money for them. The whole thing has to be completely smashed from the old order. That's certainly why I was running. Whether or not Ken will do that, none of us know.
I was going to say they have articulated, and Jane, who's the head of the Democratic state chairs, newly elected, and Ken are both people who built organizing infrastructures, and they understand that we have not built a national infrastructure. The Democratic Party is really hollowed out when it comes to the organizing capacity, and they're made a commitment to invest in states and hire full-time executive directors. I mean, Jane was a volunteer chair. You know how much time these people spend? Yeah. And it's not okay that these are not compensated positions. We need people on the front lines who are compensated. We need to make sure parties have resources. And then we have to make sure people understand that our issues are the winning issues, because Trump is only going to be in it for himself, his family business, and the other oligarchs, right? I mean, that's, But
it's even...
Yeah.
It's even worse than that, though, because you have to ask yourself, where the hell did the money go? So it's not just that the states did not have more decision-making power, or even the caucuses or the councils. It's kind of worse than what you just said. It's not just about what we have to do going forward. I remember at one of the forums when Ben Wickler said, well, we have to review all those contracts. I said the Democratic Party needs to take in the level of abject failure that has occurred here. In any business, that level of failure, we lost the White House, the House, and the Senate, and all these legislatures, which have actually even become super majorities. In any business, somebody coming in from the outside, which is actually what happens usually when there's been this level of failure. Somebody coming in from the outside is actually what usually happens in business. No one would be considering reviewing these contracts. And what I said was I'd go in and I would tear up these contracts. And I said to the guys, I said, I'd be a much tougher boss than either of you. Ken, you're talking about how we need to have a task force. No, we need to have a chairman who comes in and says, you guys have failed, you have sabotaged, you deserve to crash and burn, but the American people did not deserve to crash and burn with you. So on that, I agree with Bree. There needs to be a much deeper level of reckoning. So I'm somewhere in between both of you on that. I agree with Bree. There has to be the reckoning, but we got what we got. And we can continue to say all that, even though, the chair is not going to be someone who's going to say it.
I mean, we talked a little bit about this. You did indicate to me, Marianne, that there was some discussion about the Democratic failure to deploy a 50-state strategy. Of course, that was something that Bernie Sanders talked a lot about. I have mentioned this, I'm sure, on the show before, but I reported back at The Intercept in 2018, there were 2 open Senate seats in Mississippi at a time when Democrats needed 2 Senate seats. Mississippi is one of the cheapest ad buys in the country. It's like the poorest or second poorest state in the country all the time. It also happens to have the largest black population in the country, so much so that you only need 15% of the white population to vote for a Democrat to win. And despite all of that, the DSCC wouldn't give any money to Mississippi. And I remember calling around and trying to talk to people to report out for this article. And everybody, including the 2 Senate candidates, Democratic candidates, got very closed-lipped when I started pressing them about how they felt about getting so little in terms of resources from the Democratic Party. It felt like mafia stuff. Like they clearly were being disadvantaged by the Democratic Party's behavior, but they wouldn't really talk about it. And suddenly everyone stopped answering my phone calls. To that end, Axios reporter Stephen Newcomb just tweeted out at the end of last month, Kirsten Gillibrand has privately signaled that the DSCC is prepared to intervene in party primaries next year. Multiple sources said Dems prepared to tip the scales in Michigan, Maine, North Carolina, etc. So they're already talking about rigging primaries. Joseph, you say that you're supportive of independent candidates. It seems obvious the Democratic Party is not. They are committed, maybe newly, to a 50-state strategy. I'd love to see it, but certainly historically that has not been the case, which is the part of why we're in this situation. And to your very important point, Marianne, there has been no reckoning. Jamie Harrison has gone out in a flame of pom-poms and celebration with a nice little edited video celebrating all of his accomplishments and is doing a media tour, and I'm sure he'll have a book out shortly. So
yeah, there's no doubt about
I guess
that. But Ken
where I
will
want to
have
lead.
a 50-state strategy. He's made that
That's
clear.
right. And there's also, the progressive delegates at the DNC, people like Larry Cohen, Zogby. We're, who are part of our revolution. We're actually organizing around, right? Our theory is the parties, the state parties, the 57 entities that make up the Democratic Party nationally. They have an ability to rewrite the rules of how you do primaries. They could say, we're not going to have dark money in our primaries, no APAC, no crypto money. And so there are those conversations happening. And they've been happening with Jane and Ken and other people who are now in the new leadership. So,
Do you think it's going
is
to
it going to
happen,
be
Joseph?
easy? No, it's a fight. But coming up with creative ideas and then pushing them is how we did it with Fight for 15. We can do it with this in the party.
But this is exactly what we mean when we will know within 6 weeks. What there has been is a majority of these super members that were just simply appointed. They were not elected. So they had a majority in the bylaws committee. So no matter what people wanted, they were able to override. We will know. Either Ken stands up for doing the right thing, or there's a bunch of just what most of us will see at the end of the process is just, you guys aren't going to do it. You're just talking. At which point, I can only speak for myself, but I think a lot of people will say no. The problem I have, Brie, also with the third party issue, not that I'm very aware of how important third parties have been in American history. I understand that we would be much better off with a parliamentarian system, although that's not going to happen. I understand the unholy alliance of the duopoly. I understand all that. And this is not a but, it's just an additional factor. People are people. The corruption that we see in the Democratic Party, the corruption that we see in the Republican Party, I'm not naive enough to think there won't still be human beings as part of these third party efforts. That's number one. It's not like they will be lacking in all of the stuff and the stuff that we hate. That's number one. And number two, I'm not sure anybody is really fully taking in the hundreds of millions of dollars that are necessary in order to stage a powerful third party effort. I hope we will. Someone will. I hope so.
Well, Bernie
think also
did.
Those of us who feel the urgency of this moment. Pardon?
Bernie out-fundraised everybody in 2020.
I would have. Listen.
But wait a minute. No, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying, Marianne,
just gone over. Yeah.
Well, this is what I'm saying. That Bernie out-fundraised everybody in 2020. Had this organization, Our Revolution, ready to go, and potentially what people wanted, as you're nodding, and I'm sure you're aware, Marianne, and you're probably aware, Joseph, to flip into being a independent party, to be a political force, not just a sort of organizing force. And that didn't happen. And many folks are very frustrated that they felt like the potential of the Bernie organizing machine and fundraising machine was ultimately cowed in subservience to a Democratic Party, which has demonstrated its superior willingness to go after the left than to go after the right. And I see you nodding, Joseph. And it's difficult for me to understand how, in the wake of that reality, many of us believed in an inside strategy. I gave my mid-30s.
Yeah, we do that.
I gave my mid-30s to that strategy and working for Bernie Sanders.
That sounds so funny to a woman my age.
Yeah, well, those are some crucial years,
Yeah.
And so
just tell me a better strategy and how to execute it, and I'm down. We will move.
Well,
right?
I
but that's
would
the
love to
thing.
see.
But our leaders, our members have voted on this strategy, and I respect the grassroots. So
has there been an internal conversation, a robust debate about whether our revolution should pivot to
the analysis is like it's too much resource. The gatekeepers, the Republicans, Democrats have set it up such that it's rigged. I mean, people have tried. Even working families has tried, right? Mm-hmm. They have a lot of money, and they have a different theory. And it's incredibly challenging, right? There's been a lot of talk. I came out of the labor movement, more than 2 decades of organizing workers. We've talked about getting a labor party. Challenging.
And what?
I totally think there needs to be a labor party.
It's challenging, for sure.
And
so everyone likes to say,
when unions, which have been wiped out systematically by both Democrats and Republicans, they're the one organization that has the resource to do it, and they think it's incredibly difficult. So
it's incredibly difficult. But what's the upside of the current strategy? Are you feeling like the gains and the resources that you're putting toward the Democratic Party are paying off over the last?
Well, I'm saying we're fighting oligarchy and a descent into authoritarian capitalism on multiple fronts.
And ultimately
on multiple fronts, meaning we're organizing.
Chair
we are organizing within the party. Because in the world as it is, there is really only 2 parties in our democracy. Right. And
so
we need to do what Donald Trump did. No, but it's on us, sister. We need to do what Donald Trump did. He took over and hijacked the Republican Party. Why can't we do that? Bernie should do that, right?
Do you see how that's... Well...
No, I'm saying,
Bernie agree on that.
Bernie has demonstrated a complete and total unwillingness to do that. He's not going to do that. The whole story I just told of our revolution, the post-Bernie campaigns, is that he is fully bought in, for whatever reason, into working within the Democratic Party and not being adversarial and oppositional, even though I would argue that, yes, unions are maybe the second most, or one of the most powerful groups, but the coalition that Bernie had put together, the attention that he had, the energy that he had, 30% of the Democratic Party was with him. He was able to out-fundraise everybody with these small dollar donations. And I believe that if he had committed to actually investing that in an oppositional system to the Democratic Party instead of one that worked within it and was subsumed by it, then those people would still be energized and we would not be in this existential crisis that we are in currently today. I strongly believe that. So to sit here and have this sort of circular argument, though, Joseph, where we say, well, we don't have a third party, but we can't really invest in third parties because it's a lot of effort. And so we don't have a third party.
Here's what I would say.
Within the 2 parties, and we have to take it over, but nobody's going to take it over.
Bring it back to where Marianne is, we're in the fight. And I ask that you respect the activists who put in the time and energy to following what we believe in this moment. And is the Democratic Party great? No, it's corrupt, but we should take it over, and we're fighting to do it. If there's a viable third party option, we're down to support it.
No, you got to make the viable third party viable, Joseph. You can't just sit here. Why is there this willingness to make the Democratic Party viable?
I mean, we're trying to do this. Right. We are fighting to elect people. We have critiqued Biden. We have critiqued Harris. We are speaking truth to power, but we get marginalized. But we don't give up. Right. I mean, having led the fight for 15, we changed the narrative by putting workers in the street. We changed. Right. We got unions finally came back into relationship with the White House because we put people in the streets. right? First term, I was sitting in there talking with the White House staff saying you need to do this for workers. And they were like, no se puede. Every conversation, whether it's White House counsel, the political office, right? The vice president at the time, Obama, right? No se puede, no se puede. And so we had to make them do it. And are we in a perfect universe? No, but we've moved the dial. We created the conditions precedent for Bernie to be progressive rock star. We created that window. Same thing with Keith Ellison, right? These were the people who walked the strike. They were not, nobody knew who they were in 2013, right?
And where are those?
So what I'm saying is like, this is a movement
where are they both
in progress, and we have to struggle to get there.
But Joseph, what is your theory of the case for why Bernie Sanders ended up lobbying hard for Joe Biden to stay in the race? And the last week of his campaign or so, when all of these Democratic Party insiders, Nancy Pelosi, the Pod Save bros, were all clamoring for him to get out. How do you get to a place where Bernie Sanders was the vanguard, Keith Ellison was the vanguard, to Keith Ellison spending all of his energy seemingly on Twitter in the weeks leading up to the election, punching at Jill Stein for some reason? What is happening within the Democratic Party?
We polled our members and we said immediately that Joe Biden should step aside. So, I don't want to speak for the thought process of everyone else, but we led.
Well, I'm not asking you to speak for their thought process, Joseph, but I am asking for your theory of the case. What's your analytical assessment of what's going on with the Democratic Party and the leaders that at one time were on its left vanguard being the most committed devotees to Joe Biden, despite Joe Biden showing the most disrespect to some of the issues and constituencies that determine the outcome of the election, including Muslim voters, including labor leaders. I haven't forgotten the strike.
We're in a brand new world after January 20th. And
no, I'm not talking about after January 20th, Joseph. I'm asking you what your theory of the case is.
We have a different
about why.
Power, and I think people are going to change.
But Joseph, I want to maybe I should explain why I'm asking this question.
Enemies, no permanent
but wait a minute, Marianne. I'll come to you in a second, Marianne.
That is a foundational piece.
This is important, Joseph.
And in this moment, there's a realignment happening.
This is important, Joseph. If you want people to keep doing what they've already seen has failed, right? If you want people to say, let's take one more bite at the apple. No, this time around, we really can influence the Democratic Party. If you want people to invest in that project, I think you need to state a theory of the case for why it went wrong. Wait a minute.
No. First theory is we took out Ben Winkler.
Let me finish the sentence because that wasn't my question. With all due respect, Joseph.
We took them out.
Let me finish the sentence, Joseph, because with all due respect, that wasn't my question.
I need you to set up a
theory. No, I sustained Ben Winkler. Sorry, I missed it.
Sorry, I was like, whoa.
No, of course not. No, you need to set a theory of the case for why the best of us, the people who founded your own organization, seem to be the most committed to protecting Joe Biden, the person at the root of why we're in this situation to begin with. And the reason that you have to set out that theory of the case is because if you're expecting us to go down this road again and get behind new progressives and get behind new people who seem like they're promising, you have to have an explanation for why, what corrupting influences exist, what pressures exist. What are they going to do differently? What are they going to be able to accomplish that Bernie Sanders wasn't able to accomplish, or that Keith Ellison wasn't able to accomplish? Do you see what I'm saying?
Look, whatever you think about Joe Biden, he did much more. And I had a front row seat under the Obama-Biden presidency. And by the way, just as an aside, their administration helped make Elon Musk through federal contracts, loans, grants with no strings attached, right? And part of our fight was to put strings on giving money to federal contractors. But it took a while to get in there. But that being said, look, there are some really good things. We don't win on everything, but the president of the United States did start, right? Lena Khan is a rock star, right? She is taking on corporate power. And
I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's not quite responsive to the question.
No, I'm saying that Joe Biden actually did do some progressive things.
Right, but that's not the question.
Yeah, and I think he's probably better than Harris. So I think, we had members.
I don't quite know what to do with that
No, I'm just saying, like, if you're asking me
So
what their thoughts
do you think that
were,
Biden should have stayed in, or
no,
despite
we
the
called on
internal
him to drop
polling?
out.
So what? I don't quite know what to do with Biden is better than Harris. What is your takeaway from like why is
I
that
think they were
material?
making some kind of judgment based on moving progressive policies, right? We had industrial policy for the first time since FDR, deep investments in jobs, didn't get communicated out. But, it was, and unfortunately, Donald Trump's going to take credit for all this in a couple of years when airports and train stations come up, right? It's very dangerous. But that being said, Biden was probably the most responsive to progressive demands of any president in a very long time. We were
Yeah,
sidelined by
I got
Clinton, Obama. Yeah.
okay.
And so they were at the table. Did we get
Okay.
everything? No. But we made more. And then, yeah. And now we're in this situation, which is terrible. And we got to organize and fight. And look, I'm not a fan of, again, like I said, Democrats don't get it in terms of unions. Union density has fallen dramatically. The unions are the one thing we need to have true resistance in this country. And union halls in the Midwest are empty, right? Democrats are, and including Joe Biden, are responsible for that. The only way to win back a majority is to rebuild a strong working class union movement. FDR did that, and then that enabled, right, all of the progressive legislation we had through the 60s. It was pretty significant time in our country. We're seeing now a complete pushback by Trump and the oligarchs to, the New Deal and everything that's in our way of life. So look, it's not perfect, but we make progress. And
Okay,
things don't happen overnight.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Your stance is that it's not perfect, but Biden was better than the alternative. Marianne, I want to let you have a chance to get in here.
Well, I don't want to say
Yeah,
we wanted him to drop out, and we wanted to try to get Harris
Yeah,
to be progressive.
I gotcha. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Marianne,
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, on these last few minutes, I do diverge from you, Joseph. We now have a president who has taken the membership of the NLRB down to 2 members, which means there's not even a quorum. And I totally agree with Brianna that the Democratic Party created this mess in many
Yes.
ways. They created a hole, and Donald Trump stepped into it. And I agree with Brianna that that reckoning has to occur, even if it's only individuals among us who say so. The answer to your question, Brianna, of how did it happen are 2 words: elitism and corruption. The corruption has to do with the DNC. It's a racket, or it's been a racket. I am totally open to it being different now. It has been a total racket, hundreds of millions of dollars that are raised, shared by a small group of people in DC and their K Street consultancy firms, giving little pittance. When I was first running, I was shown the document that had to do with the negotiations that the DNC went through with the state parties, and it was considered a win because the state parties were given more money. I looked at the document because before the meeting, I was told, please read the document so that you can report on it. I read the document and I thought maybe there was a typo. So I went to my calculator and then I thought, oh, maybe my calculator's broken. And then I went back to the document and I thought, whoa, these people were celebrating getting $2,500 more a month. They were celebrating a $2 million given over the next couple of years for the Red State Fund. When you're talking about opposition that is funded by billions of dollars by billionaires on the extreme right. So what happened there, Bree, is really quite simple. The people who were in charge of all that money at the DNC were going to keep their contracts and keep their money whether Trump won or not. And that was what really went on. And I was very clear during my own campaign, these people would rather see Trump win than let someone like me be the nominee. Pure, adulterated corruption. Now, on the other side has to do with Nancy and so forth. And that just has to do with this unbelievable arrogance, entitlement, sense of everything that our founders did not want. A political ruling class who feel that they are the only ones qualified. It's the left-wing or they're not even leftists, none of us can really say, but the Democratic elite who formed a kind of aristocracy of their own and who had the audacity during these campaigns to say Because Donald Trump is such a threat to democracy, we have the right to basically to suspend democracy in our own house. These people thought they were so smart, and they looked at anyone who wasn't a member of their own club as unqualified. But really, what qualified meant to them was qualified to perpetuate the machine as they run it. Now, they have been thrown back on their heels. They have not been defeated. The fact that Ben Wickler did not win is not their defeat. It means they're going to have to get back and now they'll put on, I'm sure, a full-on charm assault on Ken when he comes to Washington. And I just hope all of us will be loud about what's really true when that begins to happen. I know if that happens, and I know I'm out. But that's the answer to your question. Elitism, arrogance, entitlement, anti-democratic action, and pure corruption. And when JFK said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. If we don't get this right,
that's right,
there will be revolution in the streets. And so I think all three of us can agree whatever we can do to forestall that catastrophic consequence is what our hearts have to be absolutely aligned with in terms of our own intention.
Amen.
So my feeling as to why Bernie, someone who is so central to my own political evolution and my own confidence in my beliefs and my ideology and how they should manifest in the political sphere, and who I felt so empowered by and value enormously for his contribution to my life, failed that political project in the final stretch, in my subjective view, is not because I think he's a bad person or uniquely susceptible to corruption, or even that there was a direct kind of corruption or pay for play or anything like that. I think that there are systemic fundamental barriers to ever succeeding as a left of center progressive within the Democratic Party. It is structurally incapable of doing the right thing, the populist thing, the worker-centered thing, because of the financial architecture of what it is. I do not think, and I gotta say, I have so much respect for you, Marianne, and so I have been like kind of tiptoeing around using this word, but I feel like I have to put it out on the table. And not just you, obviously, Marianne, Joseph as well. But it feels deeply naive to me to believe that Ken Martin from the Wisconsin Democratic Party,
Minnesota
Democratic Party, is going to be able to uniquely resist the muddied interest that have humbled such powerful and high integrity individuals like Bernie Sanders or Keith Ellison. Someone who doesn't even start with the ideological priors that those individuals had. Someone who was already like, yeah, billionaires, some of them are great, they're my friends, whatever. The idea that he would be more persuaded by very well-meaning people like yourselves than a Democratic Party apparatus that controls funding to his state, his political and professional future. Like it's just an uphill, like in my view, and I understand this is not your view, and I'm not trying to persuade you to have anything. I'm just trying to articulate how I'm feeling and how I think many people in the audience are probably feeling. I feel like there has been conclusive evidence of the impossibility of working within the Democratic Party. And I've said this to James Zogby when he's come on the show. We've had very emotional conversations because I feel from him his decades of investment and how genuine he is and how badly he wants it to be better. And I am really hurt by seeing such a well-meaning person who's been working so hard and given so much of his life to something, who has been treated so badly by the same organization and still wants to keep trying and putting all that effort in when from my perspective, it's futile. And I understand that we have subjective experiences and, he's allowed to keep trying and, I hope he's successful. But do I believe he will be? No. not through any fault of his own, but because there is just a fundamental structural impediment to him being successful. It's like trying to change an elephant into a zebra. It's just not going to happen. And the only alternative, no matter how difficult, of course it will be, is to take what resources we have and the know-how and the knowledge of people like Zogby and yourselves and commit it to an alternative effort that is oppositional to the Democratic Party, which is currently playing the role of siphoning all of the genuine resistance movement energy and sucking it back into a corporate duopoly that is going to continue to deliver to the Elon Musk, et cetera, of the world. Because 2 seconds ago, they were Democrats, now they're Republicans, and who knows what they'll be in 10 years from now. And that if we don't get to the heart of this sooner rather than later, what we're seeing now with Donald Trump is just the tip of the iceberg. And my exigency says do something about that ASAP.
Yes.
Not keep feeding into this machine that we know is not going to change.
I just think we have to fight on multiple fronts. And yeah, everything from being in the street to being on Capitol Hill to being in the Democratic Party. And look, I'll say this, I think if you're forecasting what's happening, Donald Trump is organizing centers of power in this country, from the media to the new media, right? He's got all of this lined up in Silicon Valley. And they're now, they've put out blacklists that reach into the private sector around certain policies, around not hiring Biden's people, all very dangerous. But that being said, he's organizing in a systematic way. He's going to lock down the billionaire class, right? That's what I feel. And honestly, at the end of the day, the Democrats need to start building a small donor base that is not reliant on billionaires, because I really do think the realignment we're seeing is very dangerous. And, Democrats are not going to have billionaire funders much longer if Donald Trump keeps organizing the way he's organizing, right? Because these people are all, look, they're, they're going to Mars, right? NASA is going to be a subsidiary of SpaceX and Blue Origin, right? They're pillaging and plundering. It's terrible, but in order to get in on the scam, you've got to sign up with Trump and set aside, right? Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, was used to be a Democrat. Many of these people, right, not just the tech guys, right, used to be Democrats, and he's leveraging their profit and promising even greater ROI if they return. So any billionaire that and I think billionaires are bigger than a policy failure. Like, behind every fortune is a crime, and they're criminals. And that being said, I think Donald Trump is going to organize center power and then systematic, right? They're already talking about taking out Act Blue. Elon Musk has tweeted about several times. They're systematically going to make sure that we're even a weaker opposition party than we are. And there's very little resistance, right? They're already going after the Tides Foundation, which is the back end of a lot of groups, meaning, financial sponsor. It's just dangerous. But I guess in this moment, the Democrats do need to realize they're not going to hold on to their big money, and they've got to really build an alternative, a small donor alternative. And it's doable.
And did you guys,
like from, as you know, from Bernie's campaign, it is doable. And
did you guys hear a kind of a recognition of that at all in the conversations that you had with Ken Martin or anybody else?
I did a fair amount of sidebars. It's hard to have conversations like this with large groups, but I did do a lot. And I think people see it, they're afraid.
The comment I made at the forum to the large group was that the moral authority of the Democratic Party began to leak out of the bottom of the boat when we began to take the corporate money in the 1970s. We need to remember that Hillary Clinton had a lot more money than Trump did. We know about the absurd expenditures of the Harris campaign. The Democrats, not just hypocrisy about money, but also naivete about money, thinking that if we just have enough money, we can make this happen. And I pointed out exactly what you said, Bree, which is Bernie Sanders already proved that you can do this with small appropriate donations if you just stand for the right things. So this idea that money is everything is part of the problem. I don't think after what
sorry.
after what I've been through, I don't think anybody could I'm not naive after everything I've been through. And nobody, like I said, except with the exception of Bernie, knows more than I do about the deep, vicious corruption of these people when they want to get someone out of the conversation. But I do believe in miracles. And I believe in this country. I don't know if the miracle is going to come through the Democratic Party, but I know in my heart the miracle is going to come through the American people. And the form it takes doesn't even matter to me so much, but the arousal of the consciousness and the spirit, which is something I think is happening right now. That's what I'm counting on. And that's what I wish to serve. Not any form, but the content of that American spirit that's going to stand up and say, we don't do this in this country. I absolutely believe the American people will make that clear.
Yeah, and I would also say, I think in my experience with politicians, right, as an organizer, has always been they follow the people. And, and I think the party will follow the people, but we've got to make sure we get on the streets and we say what's happening in our country is unacceptable. It is, flagrantly flouting our Constitution, our norms, our values. But we have to lead as people. That is the way change happens. And then Bernie and others show up. That's been my experience, right? Organizing the strikes, working on healthcare. This set the state, right? I did healthcare organizing when Obama was a senator a state senator in Chicago. I organized uninsured patients and exposed what was happening. And you began, right? He followed. Did he do stuff perfectly? No. Same thing with Bernie and others, right? But if we organize people, the leaders will follow. It's on us to, set the direction as citizen activists. That is imperative in this moment of anything that needs to happen. We can't just, criticize these people. We have to take some responsibility for making sure that we're leading the direction they want to go. Because at the end of the day, they do respond to people power. I do believe that.
And if they don't, they're going to lose big in 26 as well.
Yeah, they're
and
done.
It'll be the death of the
They're
party.
done.
So
yeah. Well, and I'm not. Yeah, that's right. I think this is an existential moment on a lot of levels for a lot of different issues. Whether it's the Democratic Party, whether it's the climate, whether weaponization of state violence. Again, state military, the state power against regular people. I think it's very dangerous. But that means we have to lead by example and organize and overcome fear. And that's a process that's happening. There's a lot of frightened people out there and who are leaders in organizing groups, who are, top politicals in the Biden administration. There's fear. And we have to show that we're willing to stand up. And then I guarantee you, if we rise up, the party and elected officials will follow. And if they don't, we take them out, right? I mean, that's what we have to do. But it's up to us in this moment to organize.
All right. Well, I definitely agree with you, Marianne, that I have a lot more confidence in the spirit of the American people and a lot more hopefulness about that and their resilience and about our global community as well, which I care about deeply at the same time than I do the Democratic Party. So I hope at least on that front, you were right about the resistance efforts. Thank you so much, Joseph and Marianne, to you both for spending so much time with us here today. Joseph, can you tell the people where to find more about you and Our Revolution's work on the internet and beyond?
Yes, I would encourage people, we're obviously, the best place to find us is our website, which is ourrevolution.com. And I encourage people to use the website, given that the social media platforms are compromised in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Marianne, same question.
I think thank you. I think the best place would probably be my Substack, mariannewilliamson.substack.com. Mm-hmm.
Okay, terrific. Thank you both again for all the time you were willing to spend with us today.
Thank you. Good conversation.
Thanks to all of you for listening. For more Bad Faith Podcast, you can tune in on Mondays at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast, where you get full audio and video versions of the Monday episodes. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for subscribing and keeping the lights on. As always, take care of yourselves and keep the faith. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.